Right, hello and welcome to the third and final of our webinar series on ESSA's fifth indicator and research practice partnerships. This series is part of an effort by the Research Practice Collaboratory. And the Research Practice Collaboratory is an NSF-funded project that's developing and testing new models for relating research and practice. The Collaboratory hosts events like this one that are intended to bring together educational leaders, teachers, informal educators, policymakers, and researchers around problems of educational practice. This particular effort is one that's part of a set of initiatives focused on how research partners might help states and school districts with developing and implementing their plans for the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. And I'm actually very pleased to announce a new resource that we've just published on our website, which you can access through this tinyurl.com/partnerships in ESSA. And this was an effort, and one of our guests here, Rich Cedar from Hawaii, was involved in a meeting that helped us develop this, as was my co-host here, Michelle, to develop some resources for states and school districts. So if you are a state and looking for help from with any issue related to ESSA, not just fifth indicators, but also things like school improvement and the evidence provisions, this resource I hope you'll find useful. We've been working on that, and we have a few more that will be coming. And so I do want to introduce my co-host here today, Michelle Renee Valadares from the National Education Policy Center here. And you might want to say something about NEPC and then tell us a little bit about, just get us kicked off here.
Excellent. The National Education Policy Center takes the world of academic research and aims to make it accessible and useful to practitioners, to policymakers, to grassroots community organizers, folks who can actually get a hold of the research and use it to influence public policy. We really organize around the idea that education can be implemented better with true and real facts. And I think that that is the heart of our work. We had a meeting of our fellows this fall and instantly realized that ESSA was coming down and that states were struggling with implementation, and what does it mean and what are we going to have to do, and then add to it the surprise in November. I think our fellows really sat at the meeting and said, we need to think about what is the equitable definition of this fifth indicator. What does it mean? What do we know? And how can we do this right and do it right by children? And in a record speed, Bill, Liz, and I put together this publication, this quick, but I feel like really compelling publication, if I can be biased, on ESSA's fifth indicator. And you can access it here, as you can see on your screen. But the policy memo is really meant to provide states with guidance for selecting indicators that are more inclusive of school quality and student success. So implementing, really, as you seek to use indicators to better inform the practice of teaching and learning, that there's information about school climate. And obviously the fifth indicator requires this, but states can do anything they want with it. And we really believe that it can be an opportunity for states to advance their equitable goals. At that link, you can also access a video recording of our previous webinars. So if this is your first one joining us, you're welcome to go see the previous ones there, as well as, I think, continuing to have access to different ESSA resources as they become available on the link that Bill just shared. So we're doing our best to get the world of education research into your hands as you guys do the much more urgent and compelling work of trying to implement this new federal policy.
So our second webinar had focused on guidance developed by two other organizations, the Learning Policy Institute and the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity. And I encourage you to go to the website to see those. We've got those recorded there. But this third webinar today is an opportunity to hear how districts and states have gotten a head start in integrating these kinds of indicators into their accountability systems. And they've gone ahead and have done this ahead of the law, not necessarily in relation to this law, but actually jumping ahead. And so you're going to hear some really practical stories and advice about implementing indicator systems. We're joined today by 3 different groups who've been working on guidance to states regarding ESSA. And so I want to give each of them a chance to present, but and we'll save questions for the end. But I also want to take time to introduce each of them because we're really grateful to have them. First, we have a team from the great state of Hawaii who bring a school level perspective to identifying and using 5th indicator. They are Karen Aka from Academy 21, who's facilitating a K-12 alignment initiative in the Nanakuli Valley. With Karen, and if they can pop in, there we go, or Deb Knight, who's a principal, and Kim Kamioka, who are from Kapono Elementary School. And Deb, again, is a principal there, and Kim is a school counselor. This is one of the schools in this K-12 feeder pattern that's using chronic absenteeism data to improve attendance from kindergarten to grade 12. And they'll be describing their efforts, which include a really innovative strategy for parent outreach called a community walk. We're excited to have them here today, and they have to leave a little bit early, so please excuse them when they have to leave at around 1/4 after the hour, and we're going to let them speak first. They are joined today by 2 people from the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research. Jenny Nagaoka, who is the deputy director there. And the consortium is one of the longest running research practice partnerships in the United States, whose findings about the Chicago Public Schools policies and programs have influenced district leaders across the country, sorry. Jenny's research focused on policy and practice in urban education reform, particularly using data to connect research and practice and examining the school environments and instructional practices that promote college readiness and success. Welcome, Jenny. And Holly Hart, also at the consortium, is currently the survey director there. In this position, she oversees survey content development for both consortium research, and you'll hear probably a little bit about the 5 essential surveys, which looks at key conditions the consortium has documented over many years for supporting school improvement. And I think they had a new report yesterday around that came out, or the other day, about just how important those indicators are. Both Jenny and Holly are here to talk about their work to integrate elements of the consortium's work into local accountability systems. Our 3rd guest is Norma Rodriguez, who is Organizing and Policy Director for Californians for Justice, and they are a statewide youth organizing nonprofit focused on education equity and student voice. Californians for Justice is a youth-led organization that works with high school youth leaders across the state of California, and particularly in Fresno, Long Beach, San Jose, and Oakland. And most recently, they worked with the State Board of Education to include student engagement in state regulations involving local control funding allocations in school, and are continuing advocacy around the rubric used to evaluate funding plans of districts, charter schools, and also talking about school climate indicators. Norma's got experience as a grassroots organizer working on immigrant rights, economic and social justice, as well as background in arts, culture as a Spanish teacher. Welcome, Norma. So I'm going to turn it over to the Hawaii group to begin. And I'll ask Karen, would you like me to share my screen yet, or you can just cue me when you're ready?
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and ask you to put the slide up now, and then when I'm finished talking, you can take it down.
Great.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in first to introduce and share an open-ended cognitive framework that we will be using to organize our remarks. We refer to this framework as the 4 arenas of change. And from a systemic perspective, these 4 arenas of change exist in any school, office, or organization. The context is the environment in which we are situated that places demands on us as educators. And it includes things like demographic trends, political factors, economic climate, public perception, technological changes, etc. And we have no control and little influence over this context. The next arena of change that I'm going to talk about is competencies. And these are the ever-evolving repertoire of skills and knowledge that positively impact and influence student achievement and behavior. And categories of skills include teaching, collaboration, performance coaching, and leadership, all focused on facilitating student success. Conditions are the catalytic infrastructures that must be in place in order to improve student learning. And examples of conditions include schedules, defined roles and responsibilities, systems of student support, operational systems, laws, policies, and contracts. And then the last arena, which we consider the most important, is the culture of the school, office, or organization. And this includes shared values, beliefs, assumptions, norms, expectations, and the quality of relationships within and beyond the school. The culture is kind of the DNA of the school. So you can kind of get a feel for the DNA or personality of the school as soon as you step on campus. We can't control any of the four arenas of change, but we can influence competencies, conditions, and culture. And with chronic absenteeism in the middle of these arenas, this K-12 collaborative here in Nanakuli began to ask themselves, what competencies do we need, what culture is required, and what conditions or systems do we need to support the individual students who are chronically absent. Deb Knight is going to share with you the context in which these three K-12 schools are located and also the culture. And then Kim Kamioka will address the key competencies like data analysis that are needed to address chronic absenteeism. And then to conclude, both Deb and Kim will share what systems are in place to create the targeted opportunities to address chronic absenteeism. Deb?
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Thank you very much for including us in this, giving us this opportunity to share our hard work. Kapono Elementary School is in the Ahupua'a, or the land division in Hawaii, of Nanakuli. And we are on the island of Oahu and maybe 20 miles from Honolulu and 25 miles from Waikiki, which is better known. However, we are in a hard-to-fill and a geographic hardship area. Our community is about 65,000 households. Our three schools have, I'll speak for my data, but we have a 90% plus free and reduced lunch population. We have 78% Native Hawaiians, and we are the largest elementary school in this complex area. My sister elementary school up in the valley, she actually services the Hawaiian homesteaders, who her data is actually kind of flipped from mine. She has about 68% free and reduced and a 95% Native Hawaiian. And our high school, which is comprised of about 1,000 students, actually has 70-75% for those two data points. So when you talk about schools, public schools who provide equity to large Native Hawaiian and very high poverty community, you're talking about the Nanakuli complex area. So with that said, we wanted to kind of share our struggles. We were looking for some kind of factor that was common to all three schools, and we realized that our students could not learn if they weren't here. We needed them to be in school, and when we started looking at our absenteeism rate, we saw that we had a very high percent. In 2012-13, when our state system decided to begin the Strive High accountability system, we were at 41% chronic absenteeism, which the state of Hawaii describes as 15 days or more absent. So we started the deeper dive in trying to find out what was causing our students to be absent. Of the 800, 900 kids we had at that time, there were about 350 of them who had emergency health conditions. And that is also in keeping with high poverty communities. They had the asthma, they had the allergies, and they had the skin conditions. And so, and of course, a big thing in Hawaii was the head lice. We call them ukus, little thing. So that's kind of like the context. We started looking at that, and then as the schools communicated with each other, we started looking at other things besides health conditions. We also started looking now at behavioral health conditions. And so we want to talk about what we've done to put in place at our school to help mitigate some of those root causes. And now remember, the perspective that we have is we focus on what we can control. And while we want to, in the future, look at the more parent and community engagement with supporting our attendance, Kim is going to just run down some of the things we put in place in our school to support our kids and support our families to make sure that they could come to school. Mahalo.
Hi, I'm Kim Kamioka, school counselor. So what we did after a training with Karen Aka was she introduced the 3 reasons why students don't go to school, which is the can'ts, where something prevents them from going to school, along with won't, avoiding something at school or on the way to and from school, and the don'ts, decided they'd rather be somewhere else. So after that, I took that back to our school with our committee group that dealt with health and wellness. We actually broke it down and we asked the teachers, the frontline people that see our kids every day, like, what are some of the reasons why our students don't come to school? And we were able to generate a list of can'ts, won'ts, and don'ts. So we looked at the things as a school, what can we control or what can we do to have in place as far as what we can help to decrease our chronic absenteeism. And so we started to look at our data a lot more, especially with breaking down the chronic absenteeism by grade levels to see, which grade levels have the higher number of chronic absenteeism. We also started we work with our another consulting group that helps us with our data, looking at red, yellows, and greens. So they were able to take our attendance data and categorize them based off of an 8.5 elapsed attendance or absences for that school year, which is equivalent to the 15 or more days listed as chronic absenteeism. And we were able to group our kids based off of those numbers and looking at trends as far as, okay, all the kids in the reds are they families? So looking at it from a family perspective, also looking at yellow kids where they're the kids in the middle that could either be greens or go to that level of being chronically absent. And what we did was our teachers targeted that group where they would target 2 students per quarter, and they would do some strategies as far as the 17 proactive strategies, greeting at the door, building that relationship, 5-1 positive, making the kids want to be in school, making them feel comfortable in school, and using those strategies to get them. And each quarter we would provide the data along with our my co-counselors to the grade levels, and teachers would target 2 students per grade, per classroom. And then the counselors would target the red students as far as those already in that chronically absent section, and we would target those students with the daily check-ins, setting goals with those students and working together with the parents and along with the students with that. And that's what we did as a school, along with all other activities for the school, such as announcing classes with 100% perfect attendance, along with posting of posters of classrooms with 100% perfect attendance, posting our daily attendance rate to our parents and posting it in the bulletins, along with presenting at all parent meetings, parent nights, parent events, with as far as making them aware and educated of what chronic absenteeism is.
I would like to also say, Bill, I really thank you for that comment about, recognizing our little group effort in terms of doing what was right even before the mandate comes down. And that's, I really look forward to learning more from you and how to get better with this indicator. But I just want to leave everyone with this. Nani Kapono means look to the righteous. Pono means doing the right thing. And so when we look at an indicator like chronic absenteeism as one success indicator, high achievement, boom, big accomplishment for us to work through, I think you need to know, researchers and all you fellow educators, that we are about doing the right thing for kids. So keep up the good work. Mahalo, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mahalo to you. Karen, did you have anything at the end you wanted to add, or what shall I? Good.
No,
Okay.
I think that's it.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. Mahalo, and we should be really looking to you, the righteous in Hawaii, for your work. So we'll be looking forward to hearing how it goes. And a lot of states are really choosing this indicator. Before I turn it over to Jenny and Holly, so I think many will have a lot to learn from the really practical strategies of how you're using the data to really make a difference in children's lives. So
one thing that I would just add is it was actually research from Johns Hopkins that we used for the can'ts, won'ts, and don'ts. And so I thought it was important that that the research folks know that it's so important for us to be able to have that available, to be able to get down on the ground and figure out what to do next.
Wonderful. No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm delighted to turn it over to Jenny and Holly and the consortium work, because you all are drawing, and I hope people will listen for, there's such rich measurement work and a base upon which to draw, that I hope many states will follow in suit in really thinking about the issues as you guys are going to talk through right now.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to get ours started. Oh, okay, great. So Holly and I are going to be kind of taking a slightly different perspective on this, kind of more from taking a step back as indicators, but I think the folks from Hawaii did an amazing job to really kind of explain what this looks like on the ground, and we're kind of going to be putting it up a level to talk about what indicators look like, more some general principles, and the process that we went through moving from kind of developing surveys as an indicator to their being used in practice. So I'm going to start by giving you a quick background on who we are at the Consortium on School Research and how we operate as a research practice partnership. And then I'm going to be taking kind of a wide lens and talking about what makes for an effective indicator. So as people are thinking about the fifth indicator in ESSA, just keeping in mind, what should you be thinking about as you're trying to select this? And a lot of this goes hand in hand with what we just heard about the work in Hawaii. From there, we're going to be turning it over to Holly, who will be talking about surveys as indicators. We're talking about how we started from having a theoretical framework into an overview of the validation work we did, how they're being used, the continued development, and we'll be concluding with some issues to consider. So we're going to be trying to cover a lot of ground in the next 15 minutes or so. But just to give you a quick background on the Consortium on School Research, and Bill alluded to this. We've been around since 1990. We've actually been administering surveys for almost our entire history. We started by administering a teacher survey in 1991. Since then, we have added student surveys. We survey students from grades 6 to 12, and we also so we do teacher, students, and principals, and we do this on an annual basis right now. So research practice partnerships, we're place-based, focusing on the Chicago public schools, and a lot of this work is that we're working closely with CPS educators and policymakers. And we're really trying to identify what are the important problems that they're facing and helping to identify potential solutions by showing what's happening inside of schools and what key leverage points are. So our survey work has played a tremendous role in this process because without some way of measuring it, we don't actually know what's happening. It's hard to know what's happening inside of schools. But we do see that our role is not to just be providing answers and coming in from outside and saying what should happen. The idea behind our work is that we're trying to build the capacity for school reform, so really helping practitioners, school leaders, district leaders to be more effective in thinking about what actually matters for student success and school improvement. And one of the ways that we've been doing this over time is by providing actionable data to schools. And so the district and the larger education community and the practitioners within them can really start to see what's happening inside of schools. And so this is one of the things that has been really different about our process of research is that collected data, we did conduct research on it, but throughout our history, it's been a really important part of it that we are sharing that data back with schools so that it can be used for improvement efforts. So yeah, one of the ways that we have developed the surveys is this idea about how indicators can be used for improvement and the key role that measurement plays in helping schools improve. So, so one of the big things that we talk about is about how indicators can be used to identify which students in schools are in need of support. So you can identify their strengths and their weaknesses. So if we're thinking about a survey measure like student-teacher trust, it can help schools understand, do they have a strong level of student-teacher trust within their school? Is this something that they should be working on? And once a school has identified an area where they might be in need of support, start to develop strategies to be addressing these issues. And then from there, since it's being measured over time, they can determine whether or not their strategies have been effective or not. One of the other really important roles that indicators play in improvement efforts is that it provides a signal to school practitioners about what the priorities are. So that they can actually, so when something is being measured, they are supposed to kind of clarify what actually matters, thinking about what's important, and it also clarifies the sorts of definitions about what we actually mean about particular concepts. Another important role that indicators play is that they provide a signal to students and their families about where students in schools stand, and also what important areas for improvement might be. So, so one of the things that is kind of interesting about surveys, and actually test scores as well, is that they were originally developed under this idea of measuring for helping improve. And after the fact, they started being used for accountability. So this is kind of a changing regime, sort of changing how they are being used, and there are pros and cons that are associated with this. So this is not to say that improvement and accountability are in conflict, but when you're moving from an indicator that has been traditionally used for improvement to accountability, it sort of changes some of the dynamics of what's happening. So on the plus side, it focuses attention on what actually matters. So it can be focusing attention on key levers for change. It can be focusing attention on particular subgroups. There's a lot of different ways that accountability is a really strong signal about what the priorities are of a district, of a state. Another really important part of what happens under accountability is that the data quality tends to improve. Because once people start paying attention to data, people will want to make sure that the data are actually correct, and so there'll be a lot more monitoring happen. One of the things that surveys bring to this accountability part is that surveys capture a lot of different key concepts. So really a lot of the things that are happening within schools that lead to improved student outcomes, and it allows for doing it from multiple perspectives. So it's not something This allows for teacher voice to come in, and it also allows for student voice. And there was work under the MET study which showed that using student surveys is actually an effective way of measuring what's happening in the classroom. On the downside, though, people do have concerns about when you move to an accountability system that there are incentives to manipulate the data. So there are questions about whether surveys are as trustworthy under an accountability system. Another concern is that the indicator becomes the goal and it's narrowing the focus. So ultimately, what we care about for improvement efforts is that we really want student outcomes to improve. If you're using surveys and you have a measure of something like teacher collaboration, although teacher collaboration is tremendously important, we don't have schools to provide teachers more opportunities to collaborate. We want to make sure that people are paying attention to teacher collaboration in service of ultimately improving student outcomes. Okay, so moving on to the idea of what are characteristics of effective indicators. You know, under ESSA, it talks about how the non-academic indicator must be valid, reliable, comparable, and statewide. And this really makes a lot of sense under the idea of accountability. You know, we want to make sure that the indicators that we're using are valid and reliable. For accountability purposes, we need to be able to compare across schools, and we also want to be able to do that across the state. I think what we want are not just these characteristics. We really want to be making sure that this opportunity to be choosing new indicators, that they're also things that really can be used for improvement and that are really of use at the school level and are not just of measuring and evaluating schools. So one of the first important things about an effective indicator is that it's addressing a problem or issue that is considered to be a priority by district leadership, school staff, students, and their families. And one thing that surveys bring is that these are allowing a way of measuring what's happening with the schools, and students and their families care whether or not schools are safe, supportive, and challenging places, and surveys are being able to evaluate that. And so it is in alignment with the priorities that any number of stakeholders have. Another key characteristic of an effective indicator is that it's predictive of the outcome of interest. So you want to make sure that the indicator actually has a relationship to what you care about. So with the 5 essential supports survey that the consortium has been doing for the past 20 years, Kali will be talking about this a little later, but we've shown how the key concepts that are measured on that survey are predictive of school and of increased student achievement in math. Another key characteristic of indicators is that they provide information that school practitioners can take action on, have an impact on. So it's something that is malleable and is actionable. And so one of the things that surveys are is that these tend to be processes that school practitioners actually have the ability to change. And through this change, they can be improving how their schools are organized, make them more effective at improving student outcomes, such as those that are measured other indicators under ESSA. Another key characteristic is that indicators are available at the right time for practitioners to act. It's not enough to have information that is 3 years old or 4 years old, because that's not terribly actionable. So one of the things that surveys can do is provide information back to schools about what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are to help them develop priorities. And the surveys that the consortium has been administering and are now being done across the state of Illinois, among other places, is that it provides information that allows practitioners to set the priorities of what they want to be on. And finally, another characteristic of an effective indicator is that it's based on research evidence of a direct causal linkage to the outcome of interest. So that's kind of a complicated set of language, but what it means is that improvement on your indicator, and so if you get better at student-teacher trust, there's a direct linkage to student outcomes. So it's not just that there's a relationship between the two, it's that if you improve on this, you will also see an improvement in the outcomes of interest. And so it's a little bit different than just being predictive. Okay, so I'm going to give you the high-level story of our journey, and Holly will be filling in some of the details. But we sort of went through this long process of conceptual framework, having indicators, validating them, developing a diagnostic tool for school improvement, and then this ongoing cycle of refinement. So we started with a conceptual framework, which are 5 essential supports for school improvement. We then went through a process of developing ways to measure the key concepts that are part of that conceptual framework. So we had survey measures like student-teacher trust. And so it's not enough to actually just be able to measure something. We actually want to be making sure that we're measuring what we think are measuring, and is what we're measuring actually valuable, and is it related to students? Another key part of the process is, not just having means of measuring it, but actually providing schools with tools so that they can be able to diagnose what their strengths are. Are they serving certain types of students? How is my school doing? Am I serving my boys as well as girls, and things like that. And then finally, it's this cycle of improvement. So, we have gone through this process of developing a conceptual framework. Ways of measuring it has been validated. We have a tool, but it's not like you develop a tool and you've developed your indicators, you're done. It's a constant process of refining it, making sure that the survey measures are right, getting feedback from practitioners to see, to understanding how useful this is to them, checking that under changing conditions or changing policies that the survey measures are still working as when they were initially developed. So from here, I am going to turn it over to Holly.
And a couple of minutes, is that, just to get a time check, so I want to make sure Norma has time. Is that all right?
Okay, yes. Oh, okay. All right, swapping seats here. Okay, well, the 5 Essentials conceptual framework was born from the efforts of many concerned CPS members of the school community, including teachers, principals, the superintendent, form organizations, researchers, and local school council. And what emerged was a conceptual framework that was based in both practice and research. So the conceptual framework is 5 essential supports: effective leaders, collaborative teachers, supportive environment, involved families, and ambitious instruction. These are clearly both important but also multidimensional. So in order to measure each of these, use 4 to 5 survey scales for each. A survey scale being a set of questions focusing on one concept. So for example, to capture effective leaders, we have 4 scales: program coherence, teacher-principal trust, teacher influence, instructional leadership. For these scales, we choose them so that they are covering unique but related concepts. And then, as Jenny said, they also need to be related to outcomes that we care about. Now, some aspects of these essentials are measured with teacher surveys and some with student surveys. So, for example, student-teacher trust under supportive environment is a student measure. So how do we go about creating an indicator that is a survey scale? Once an important idea is identified, questions are written and tried out
on many people in many ways. Here you see an example of one scale. It's program coherence that was under effective leaders. The concept behind it is that having consistent focus of programs and initiatives in school prevents people from being pulled in many directions and often competing plans. So we try out questions with focus groups, interviews to get people's reactions to the questions. We conduct pilot surveys to get information on reliability and validity. And then after the full survey, we can assess this particular indicator as, or this particular scale as an indicator. See if it does predict outcomes and if it can differentiate between schools. So this brings us to validation. As Jenny said, the 5 Essentials framework was validated in a longitudinal study using data from 1990 to 96 and then replicated with more recent data. These analyses are described in Organizing Schools for Improvement. And one key finding was that schools that were strong in 3 to 5 of the essential supports were more likely to improve in both math and reading. But we must continuously reassess both the reliability and validity of measures, but also their continued relevance to current conditions. So we also talked about this not being for research purposes only, but intended to be a diagnostic tool for schools. So this slide provides a few snapshots from our online school reports. The first here, you can see our overall performance on the 5 essentials. Yellow indicates that the school is scoring at average, the average range. Green is above average and red is below average. Reports can also show you trends over time, and you can compare your school's performance to the district and also schools that are similar to yours. Finally, each scale broken down by gender or grade. So you can see how your 6th graders compare to your 7th graders or how your boys are doing compared to your girls.
Hey, Holly, I might need to cut in. I want to make sure that Norma has time to present.
Sure.
Give us just a concluding thing about where to find out a little bit more, and we'll hopefully have a little bit of questions, time for questions.
Sure, absolutely. So at our website, which I think was on the beginning slide of our presentation, you can connect to all of our previous research, and also if you click on information on the surveys, you can see school reports and all information there.
Great. And sorry to have to cut short. It's such
That's okay.
a great piece, and but I do want to give time for our last panelist, Norma Rodriguez from Californians for Justice, to speak. So Norma, please, you are
Yes.
on.
Thank you, everyone, for having me on, Bill. How much time do I have so that I can make sure to?
We'll let's go. Have you go to 4:31. It's a little bit after the close. That'll give you at least 15 minutes, and then we'll let people have time to stay on for a couple minutes after we got started, a couple minutes late. So we'll just continue on as long as people have time.
Okay, great. I'll set my timer, which is not working right now. So you'll tell me. I'll trust that you're tracking time.
Yeah.
I ran a webinar before. I know how it is. So once again, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on this webinar and talk about the fun stuff that we're doing out here in California. As Bill had mentioned, we're in 4 regions, and we're also in Sacramento doing some fun work. We're in regions that are very different from each other, which is really awesome for our work and our research, right? We're in rural areas in Fresno, then we're in San Jose, Oakland, and Long Beach. So we really, that's one of our strengths, I feel like, and we can bring in many perspectives as we're moving our work forward. Just a quick, our elevator pitch phrase for Californians for Justice is that here at CFJ, we believe that young people are the leaders we need to create the healthy, just, and vibrant schools all of our communities deserve, right? So we ensure that students have the opportunity to grow as leaders, and we work with them to win campaigns so that every school and community can thrive. The way we do that is we really combine, we call them powers of. We have really fun, phrasing for our organization because a lot of our framing and everything comes from our youth, right? So we have our power of organizing, our power of research and policy, and we also look at traditional media, earned media, and social media. And again, I'll reiterate that we are truly youth-led. We have a statewide strategy team that gives input on our campaigns. We have students on our board, and our students are involved with the creative actions, the goals, and direction of the organization. And I highlight it just because oftentimes in these conversations, right, about indicators and where we're going and how this is going to improve school, like we actually don't have students front and center talking about it, right, and getting their input. So that's what we bring and we're able to connect to when we're doing this work. So in the context of the indicator work, our recent win was in 2016, when the newly adopted local control funding formula evaluation rubric, we were able to win key measures of school climate, student and parent engagement, and equity as two of the, as the key indicators, right, for accountability. In addition to that, we were able to win an equity report to flag racial, ethnic, and other student groups that are falling behind. We were also able to get a commitment from the California Department of Ed to develop a statewide school climate survey and parent engagement measure, which is really exciting. We're currently a part of that work group that the State Board of Ed has put together. And some of the stuff that Jenny was talking about, right, landing on what that's going to look like, right? What are we going to be measuring? What are the constructs is really what we're wrestling with right now. So it's a really fun ongoing conversation, lots of different thoughts on that, right? I'm trying to land on that. The other piece that we've been involved in is since there was the passage of a LCFF display rubric, our students and some of our parents of our students have really been involved in focus groups with the State Board of Ed to talk about how it's going to be user-friendly, right? How is this actually going to be used? So like the State Board of Ed folks come into our office and they break it down, which is better, right? Like, do you like this display better versus this? Which is really exciting because our students feel so excited that they're, you know, able to provide that input. And it's just such a concrete piece for this work moving forward, right? That we're going to be able to have our communities be able to access this information. So how we won, right? This is a fairly big win where, you know, I think there's maybe like 15 staff across across the state. But we really had some really strategic thinking about how we were going to get this win and why, right? So our students are the experts. We center them on that. So it was great to hear like our students knew as much as like some of the policy folks around like the local control funding formula, right? So we would do consistent deep dives with them on what this would mean for them at the local level, what we're trying to change, right, from the state down to the local, and really connecting it to what they were experiencing in their schools. And then we just had a lot of fun, right? We, the State Board of Ed started looking forward to our creative skits that students would come up with. And oh my goodness, you give students free rein and you get some really great stuff. My favorite one was when we had, like, it's almost like a little creative theater where the phrasing the students came up with was don't leave students out in the cold. And so like as far as school climate, right, because there was a point where that we weren't going to get that. So we had students dressed up in like summer gear, like board shorts, right? And then, or one student, and then the others were all bundled up. And so the student that was in the board shorts pretended to be freezing. And so then their friends came around and wrapped them up in a blanket, right? Like don't leave students out in the cold. Just like a lot of creative actions, delivering notes to the State Board of Ed folks. We did a lot of social media using the hashtag Redefine School Success. We did delegations with State Board of Ed members with our students coming in. Obviously their testimony at the State Board of Ed, and just ongoing engagement, right? And then working with our allies as well to join our messaging. So the way that we do our work is that we put pressure from the state and the local, right? So we're gonna take this win that we got at the state around the local control funding formula and these indicators, and we're gonna take it to the local level, right? We're gonna be creating opportunities to advocate for ELL Cap funding at the local level. that focuses on our relationship-centered schools campaign, right? So we are already involved in the ELL Cap process at each region, making sure that students and parents have input as to where that money is being invested. And we're looking for it to be invested in relationships between students and school staff and all of the strategies that go around that. Just to pivot a little bit into that, the way that we landed on the relationship-centered schools campaign is that we did surveys with about 2,000 students across the state, asking them what they really needed to be successful, right? And the answer that became clear was connection between school staff, teachers, and themselves, right? We also highlighted that the finding was that 1 out of the 3 students that we surveyed couldn't identify a single caring adult on campus, right? So we interviewed educators, policymakers, we held focus groups, as well as town halls, and this is what we saw, right? This ongoing need for connection, right? And this aligned well with this shift, right, in the school system, moving away from test scores and moving into social emotional learning aspects of school success. That's how we landed on our campaign. So we're using this opening that we created with these indicators that are beyond academic measures at the state to be able to use them at the local to have the money invested from the LCAPs into our relationship-centered schools work. So right now we're on the ground, we're involved in the LCAP process, we're having actions and postcard signings, asking folks, teachers, decision makers to sign on to relationships in our schools. And we have a menu of options where, you know, every district obviously is very different. So it's like a toolkit you can mix and match and start implementing or adopting specific practices that are actually going to start creating this shift, right? And each district, obviously, that we're in is very different places. We've got districts that are fully on board. They're all in. They've already started this investment without us, right? And then we've got folks in rural areas that, you know, support Trump and, you know, believe that we should build walls, right? So it's very, very interesting. It's really fun to like really have to shift up the strategy and, you know, that's where we're at. That's how we've gone from statewide down to the local, and then that's where we're at with our campaign. I'll leave it there if folks have questions. I know that, you know, folks, I'm sure, are excited about hearing from everyone again. So yeah, I'll hand it back to you, Bill.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. You know, there's a framework that Kevin Wellner, Jeannie Oakes, and some of the rest of us use, and it's about, in research, we call it the technical, the political, and the normative. I think Jeannie more recently has talked about it as powerful ideas, powerful solutions, and powerful people. And when I look at this mix of presentations, I see that each of you talked about different aspects of that, you know, and clearly from your positionality, like where you are, you're going to talk more about one or the other. But I think one of the things that comes across so incredibly powerful in these 3 presentations from 3 totally different parts of the country is that that combination of powerful ideas and powerful solutions and powerful people is what makes equity stay at the forefront of any educational change. So I think that, you know, as Norma was talking about in California, the powerful people comes out a lot in your story, in this case, young people, right, who are really holding states so accountable for really not only measuring the right things, but continuing to monitor and care about the right things. And then our colleagues in Chicago, you talked a lot about some really powerful technical solutions that come out of powerful ideas, right? Some really powerful ideas of pushing past just measuring 1 or 2 things to think about the whole, about what you care about in a reform and how to make sure, I mean, both of you talked about school climate quite a lot, both Chicago and California. And then from Hawaii, we heard very similar stuff about, you know, they took this powerful idea out of research, can'ts, won'ts, and don'ts, and then talked about how can we actually operationalize that in our school site? What do we need to do as a campus? And in their case, really talking about how first you had to talk to the teachers and say, why are the kids missing school? Why is it? What is going on? I think my main question, and there's probably only time for one because we're so close to the end, but my question coming out of these presentations is really, which of these areas do you consider your sweet spot? So CCSR folks as a reform support organization, Norma as a grassroots community organization of young people. Our Hawaii colleagues had to leave early, but they're school leaders. Which do you consider your strong points, and how do you build relationships with other people in the education sectors in your communities so that you have the whole mix? Because I think a big part of the win in these stories was having the whole mix. So I don't know, Norma, if you want to start first, and then we'll ask the folks in Chicago.
Yes, that is an excellent question that I spend a lot of time strategizing around. That's actually one of the main focuses for me, is how do we intentionally build relationships in each region, right? Because, with working with young people and having young people at the front and center, you come with a lot of stereotypes or dismissiveness, right? Like, oh, young people, what do they know, right? Like, I'm not going to spend the time to get to know them. But our young people are leaders and they know what they're talking about. So what we do is we create a lot of opportunities to highlight that, right? So we do, the regular bread and butter organizing, delegation meetings. But one of the strategies that has really worked well with us now is to put together what we call non ask events. So what that means is it's really like a literally we call them relationship building events. We're highlighting our work. We're inviting decision makers that we want to understand our work, that we want to bring into our work, to come and be a part of the events, right? So we're doing, one of the things that we're working on right now, which I'm really excited about, is teacher appreciation events. So our students are involved in a process of nominating students that they feel embody relationship-centered schools, that have taken the time to get to know them, that have made a difference to them, right? And so we're having an awards ceremony for that. So then we're bringing in decision makers, school board members, state board members if they're in the region, unions to come, right? We're working with the unions to do the nomination process as well. And so this event is like a feel-good event, right? But at the same time, we're able to highlight and showcase why relationship-centered schools and why our solutions are the right solutions, right? And so we've already done a round of that last year through these state of education webinars in each region, bringing in the experts and decision makers, framing them as experts, right, to uplift what they're doing, but at the same time to build with them, so that the next time we're trying to get them to sign up for something that we're doing or to vote with us, that we already know them, we're not doing a cold call, and that they actually know our students by name, right? And so like a combination of, again, the bread and butter delegations, these power of relationship events, we literally call them that, and some even social media, right, where we're like connecting with them that way as well. It's kind of where we're at, where we're bringing folks into the fold, in addition to coalition work, right? Like if we really can't get through to someone, or they're harder to like work, get to know, we'll look at who knows them, right, through our circles and start there.
Thanks.
So yeah.
Chicago.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think it's also interesting in terms of like the consortium is and how we do our work, because I think when you think about research, you think about, oh, it's about ideas and that's it. And I think I talked a lot about ideas, but really where we see our impact coming from is not the fact that we're trying to do research of high technical quality. It really is in the relationships that we have and making the ideas that are within that research accessible to a broader audience. And a lot of that is not just like big things out in journal articles, or it's about building relationships and spending a tremendous amount of time talking to people, both to inform them, but a lot of it is actually about listening and making sure that we are asking sorts of questions. And so it's this kind of iterative process of our research, where I mean, it's always, it makes our work as an organization difficult, because like we get grants, usually it sort of ends with the publication of something, but the way that we really see our impact coming from is not the fact that we spend a tremendous amount of time talking to people. We have a steering committee who actually met today, who are stakeholders across the Chicago community, and so we bring them in together. And these are people who do not generally spend time in the same room together, like the teachers union with the district, various nonprofits. You know, there's a lot of different types of people happening around their research. And so I think it's sort of the power comes from this marrying of ideas to the people who are in positions of influence. Another place where we sort of see our influence coming from is our partner organization, the Network for College Success. And so they are another organization at the University of Chicago. They work deeply with a network of 17 high schools, and they also work with all the high schools in the city as well, institutes. But they are sort of the translators of our research and really that into something that's happening within schools. And those principles are also developed and they become leaders within the district. And so there's just a way that by helping people build the capacity and hear ideas that you can actually sort of develop people into powerful people who are sort of powerful in their own way, but then become of greater influence by developing their capacity.
Excellent. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
This was a tremendous, I mean, to hear from, you know, California, Hawaii, and Chicago, and hear how different and unique everyone is doing the work in their contextual space and from their position in the field of education. But yet how we're all united in our goals of trying to help young people and improve these school systems. It's really inspiring to hear, and I really thank all of you for taking time to be with us.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for calling us together.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.